Welcome back to EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and I'm here with Sam today to talk about something that's keeping a lot of enterprise leaders up at night. EU AI Act compliance, and specifically what it means for organizations in Helsinki as we head toward that August 2026 deadline. Sam, this isn't just regulatory theater, right?
Not even close. August 2026 is what I'd call the compliance cliff. High-risk AI systems need to be fully compliant by then, and the penalties are genuinely severe, up to $30 million or 6% of global turnover. But here's what's striking. About 73% of EU enterprises still don't have formal AI governance frameworks. That's not a small gap.
That's a massive percentage. And I imagine Helsinki Enterprises might feel they have an advantage here, given Finland's reputation for transparency and structured processes. Is that actually true, or is there a false sense of security?
It's both. Finnish business culture definitely values transparency and process rigor, which is foundational. But that foundation only matters if you intentionally build governance structures on top of it. You can't inherit compliance just from being in a well-regulated country. You have to architect it deliberately.
Let's dig into what high-risk AI systems actually means, because I think a lot of listeners assume that's some exotic corner of enterprise tech. But from what I'm reading, most companies probably already operate these systems without realizing it.
Exactly. High risk spans recruitment AI, educational systems, law enforcement tools, critical infrastructure control, biometric identification. Employment and worker management systems are probably touching most medium to large enterprises right now. And here's the kicker. Most organizations are running systems across multiple categories simultaneously, so you're not dealing with one compliance checklist. You're managing 7 parallel frameworks.
That complexity multiplies fast. What does compliance actually look like once you're inside those categories? Like, what are these organizations supposed to do?
It's comprehensive. You need tailored risk assessment protocols for each use case, rigorous training data governance with bias mitigation documentation, model performance tracking across demographic groups to catch discrimination, human oversight mechanisms proportional to the risk level, incident reporting aligned with regulatory timelines, and regular third-party audits. It's not a one-time audit. It's continuous monitoring.
So this is institutional transformation, not just a compliance department update. Now, one thing that really caught my attention in the research is this emerging tension between agentic AI and governance. Everyone talks about agentic systems like they're the future, but governance-wise, they sound like a nightmare.
They're definitely more complex than chatbots or traditional generative AI. Agentic AI systems operate autonomously. They make decisions, interact with environments, pursue goals without constant human intervention. That's powerful, but it creates governance requirements that most organizations aren't ready for. A Gartner study shows 62% of companies plan agentic deployments by 2026, but only 18% have governance frameworks that can actually handle autonomous system autonomy levels.
So there's this massive gap between aspiration and capability. What does that gap typically look like when it hits production?
Failures, regulatory violations, or both. McKinsey data shows 95% of organizations piloting AI systems fail to move them into production within 18 months. The reasons cluster around governance gaps, regulatory uncertainty, and insufficient architectural planning. For agentic systems, that's amplified because you're not just managing a model. You're managing autonomous behavior that could drift from intended parameters in ways that are hard to predict.
This is where AI lead architecture becomes essential, I'm guessing. Can you explain what that actually entails for a Helsinki-based organization?
It's strategic design of AI systems with compliance and operational maturity baked in from day one. It means defining clear governance ownership, establishing decision frameworks for autonomous system behavior, designing human oversight that's proportional to risk, creating auditability into the system architecture itself, and planning for continuous compliance monitoring as regulations evolve. It's not an afterthought, it's the foundation.
And I imagine the Nordic context matters here. Are there specific things about Finland or Helsinki's regulatory environment that change how you'd approach this?
Absolutely. Finland has a GDPR integration legacy that's deeper than many European countries, so data governance practices are more mature, but that also creates higher expectations. Helsinki Enterprises are competing with companies like Wärtsilä and Nordea, which are pushing agentic AI innovation aggressively. You can't just check compliance boxes. You need governance that's sophisticated enough to enable rapid, competitive innovation while staying compliant.
That's a really interesting framing. Compliance not as a constraint, but as something that actually enables innovation velocity because you're not constantly being derailed by regulatory surprises.
Exactly. If your governance is robust and intentional, you can move faster because you're not taking governance risks. You know what your boundaries are, you understand your risk posture, and you can make smart decisions about where to push innovation and where to be conservative.
So for someone listening in Helsinki who's responsible for AI strategy, where do they actually start? This probably feels overwhelming.
Start with a governance maturity assessment. Map what AI systems you currently operate, classify them by risk level under the EU AI Act, identify gaps between current governance and regulatory requirements, and assess your organizational readiness for agentic AI deployment. That assessment becomes your roadmap. From there, you can prioritize governance investments based on compliance urgency and business impact.
And that's something that strategic consultancy can really help with, because you need expertise in both the regulatory landscape and enterprise architecture. This isn't something you can outsource entirely, but having external expertise to guide the process seems critical.
It is. External consultancy brings regulatory expertise, benchmarks against similar organizations, and objective assessment of your readiness. But the governance structure itself needs to be yours, embedded in your culture, your processes, your architecture. Consultancy accelerates that transformation, but it's ultimately an internal journey.
Let's talk timeline. August 2026 sounds far away, but in enterprise terms, that's probably not much time.
It's roughly 18 months from now, and that's aggressive for institutional transformation. If you're starting governance design now, you have maybe 12 months to implement frameworks and 6 months to stress test and adjust. For organizations just beginning this work, that's tight. Starting immediately isn't optional.
One more question before we wrap. What does success look like? How does a Helsinki enterprise know they've achieved the right level of governance maturity?
You can demonstrate comprehensive risk assessments for all high-risk systems, documented governance structures with clear ownership and decision frameworks, human oversight mechanisms that are proportional to autonomy levels, continuous compliance monitoring with clear incident reporting processes, and the ability to rapidly onboard new AI systems without governance paralysis. You're compliant, but you're also competitive.
That's a really strong vision of compliance as enablement rather than constraint. Sam, thanks for unpacking this. For anyone listening who wants to dive deeper into EU AI Act compliance strategies, readiness scans, and AI lead architecture specifically for Nordic enterprises, head over to etherlink.ai to find the full article. We've got comprehensive guidance on the 2026 strategic imperative. Thanks for joining us on EtherLink AI Insights.
Thanks, Alex. And to anyone in Helsinki thinking about agentic AI deployment, this governance work isn't slowing you down. It's what lets you move fast with confidence. Start the assessment now.